Hello, America, and welcome back to Honest Tax Returns, Part 5 of 6, presented to the American people, December 2016. The topic of this presentation is the anatomy of gross income. Now, taxes are stressful, and I've been working on this for quite a while. So let's take a break together. Let's go to the zoo and just relax a little bit. Now, as we were walking in the zoo, we see this sign, and it says, "Warning, don't feed the animals." Well, I'm like, you're an animal. I'm an animal. Well, why can't I eat some snacks? Why can't I eat? Well, then it dawned on me that it means, don't feed the zoo animals. Doesn't mean me. It doesn't mean my pet. It doesn't mean, your children. It doesn't mean anybody that's a human. It means don't feed the zoo animals. Okay? So then after the zoo, we can go visit the restaurant, have a drink, and, chill out some more. And then on the wall of the restaurant and bar, I see this sign. It says, "No service to minors." And I'm like, well, that's kind of a very discriminatory sign, don't you think? Then it dawned on me that, you know what, I'm missing a word there. It's actually no service or no alcohol service to minors. And that happens to be the law around here, even though I don't really agree with it. But okay, anyway, so you and I are not affected, and your children don't have to drink. So we're still welcomed here. All right, after the restaurant, I go to the restroom, wash my hands and get out. And right before I get out of the door, I see this sign that says, "All employees must wash hands before returning to work." And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm a computer programmer. Why do I need to wash my hands? Then it dawned on me, you know what? It's not all employees. It means all restaurant employees. You see the trend here, guys? All right, let's go back to the library and start our studying of the taxes once more. At the library, we see another annoying sign, and this one says, "Don't mark the books." Well, I'm like, well, I got a whole bag full of books, and every one of them is marked. So how can I not mark my books? Then it dawned on me again that it means don't mark the library books. It got nothing to do with my books. Okay? So what do we learn from those situations? We learn a very important legal concept, and that is title controls subject. What are we studying? We're studying the Title 26 of the United States Internal Revenue Code. So from the very beginning, you got to be in the United States, first of all. And secondly, you got to be talking about internal revenue for it to have any application whatsoever. Okay, who would agree with me? Well, how about the Supreme Court? Okay, and the Supreme Court says, "A statute will, as a general rule, be construed as intended to be confined in its operation and effect to the territorial limits within the jurisdiction of the lawmaker, and words of universal scope will be construed as meaning only those subjects are subject to the legislation." Now, if you're like watched some of my other videos, you'll realize that I'm gonna go to these three words right here: the lawmaker, the territorial limits, and the subject. And what do those three words equate to? Well, they equate to the authority of the law, who is Congress, the territorial or personal jurisdiction of the law, which is the District of Columbia, and the subject matter of the law, which is the internal revenue, assessment and collection of the federal income tax, right? So those are the three things in law, and right there, the Supreme Court very elegantly says it all in one sentence. I love it. Okay, so now we're going to show again that the IRC is limited to internal, domestic, United States, District of Columbia, or federal subjects. Now, this has been done several times during this presentation, but each one is a little bit different because they come from a different perspective. This one talks particularly about the gross, or specifically about the gross income. So let's begin our analysis. The first thing is that we ask our question, what is the subject matter of the Internal Revenue Code? Well, we already know this. It's a regulations for the assessment and collection of federal income tax, right? How about, according to the IRC, the federal income tax is an assessment on the what? Well, if you look at section 61, it's an assessment on the gross income. So, what is the Internal Revenue Code definition of income again? Well, we know that income is equal to gain, right? But I can't seem to find a definition for income in the Internal Revenue Code. And in fact, the courts agree with me. Here's a court case, United States versus Ballard, says the general term income is not defined in the Internal Revenue Code. Section 61 of the code defines gross income to mean all income from whatever source derived. All right, okay. So here's my question. Why wouldn't Congress just define the word income as all that comes in? Why must the Internal Revenue Code be limited to the custom definition of gross income? What are they trying to do here? Well, those of you who've been watching my other videos might draw an analogy between arms and firearms, and I would highly recommend you watch those videos as well. But the bottom line is because the Congress, they can't define their words. And why is that? They can't define the word income or the word firearm or the word arm for that matter. Why is that? Because, as the Supreme Court says, Congress cannot, by any definition it may adopt, conclude the matter, that is, with respect to the income, since it cannot by legislation alter the Constitution, from which alone it derives its power to legislate. Another case says the Treasury cannot make income of that which is not income within the meaning of the Revenue Acts of Congress, nor can Congress without apportionment tax as income that which is not income within the meaning of the 16th Amendment. You see, so there's something tricky going on here. And we like to know what's going on. So what is the effect of making a custom definition of gross income? Well, that's because, the answer is Congress controls what it defines. By defining gross income, what it's done is that it has confined the subject matter in the Internal Revenue Code, which is the subject matter of assessment and collection of federal income tax. Thus, it remains constitutional. But let's ask the other question. So what you're saying basically is telling me that gross income is a set that is smaller than all income. In other words, gross income is a category within all income. Yep, actually that's exactly what I'm saying. Section 61, gross income, is a subset of all income. Okay? Can I prove that? Well, I wouldn't waste my time if I can't, so let's prove it. Income and gross income. Let's prove that gross income is a subset within all income. So first let's define the things that are all income and the things that are all gross income as two sets separately. Next, we consider how two sets can interact. And it basically boils down to 5 choices, A through E. And just pretend you're taking the SATs now. Is income and or gross income one and the same? Is gross income within the meaning and definition of income? Or is it the other way around where income is within gross income? Or are they intersecting sets where some income also belongs in the category of gross income, but not all gross income is within income? Or is it are they completely different logical sets with no intersecting elements? Well, think about this and let's do what I like to do on multiple choice questions, which is eliminate the things that cannot be. We know for a fact that gross income is or cannot be outside of all income, right? So that eliminates C, D, and E, which leaves A and B. Is income excuse me, is income and or gross income one and the same, or is gross income within the definition of income? Well, that's the question. Is gross income all income? For that answer, we go to our Supreme Court ruling, Southern Pacific versus Lowell, and they say we must reject in this case, as we have rejected in 3 other cases, that all receipts, that is everything that comes in, are income within the proper definition of the term gross income. Okay, so there you have it. We know it cannot be A. That leaves choice B, that gross income is within a subset, is a subset of all income. That's B. Okay, so gross income is a subset of all income. Now we've proven that. Okay, that's it. Now we have to put some things together. First, we know that we just proved that Section 61 gross income is a subset of all income. We also know that the Internal Revenue Code controls the assessment and collection of federal income tax. Further, we know that the federal income tax is based on an assessment of the gross income. That's defined at Section 63. It says right there. Now, we also know that the federal income tax is based on an assessment of federal income. So you put these things together, and what do you end up with? You end up with, therefore, Section 61 gross income includes federal income. I'll let you put that together. It's not that hard. But anyway, that's the conclusion I arrive at. Section 61 gross income includes federal income. Now let's put this into a diagram. We have this thing called all income, and we know that gross income is within all income. An assessment on gross income is the thing that produces the amount seen in your federal income tax, is your liability amount. That liability goes into the coffers of the United States Internal Revenue, okay, the Treasury Department. And we also know that the Internal Revenue Code controls this process at 2 points. 1, it defines what gross income is, and 2, it provides for the rules of assessment in terms of what proportion to take and how much and so forth, that finally you get a federal income tax amount out of. So we know that gross income, again, assessment becomes federal income, and that's your tax. Now, what is a diagrammatical relationship between 61 gross income and federal income? That one we're going to derive for you. It's not really that hard. But you have this thing called gross income, and we have an unknown on the right-hand side of the screen. And the gross income and this unknown income is both assessed, and they both turn out to be federal income tax. We know the amounts of the federal income tax are givens. Okay, they're equal, and that the assessment is through the Internal Revenue Code. So what could that question mark be? Well, what do you think? It has to be federal income. So I was going to put an equal sign between the gross income and the federal income, but I thought about it a lot harder, and I know that here's the statement that we really want, is that gross income includes federal income. And the reason it includes federal income, it doesn't equal federal income, is because when you include something, you are really expecting your customer to volunteer something that was otherwise not within its definition. That's how they scam you. It really should be equals. Okay, so because it includes, we cannot actually prove that 61 gross income is federal income. So we're going to make the assumption that 61 gross income contains federal income, and we want to ask the question, does there exist gross income which is not within the subset of federal income? Of course there is. It's right there. You know, it's that rim of income which is not federal income, which is included in the gross income defined at Section 61. So, what Section 61 gross income is not a subset of federal income? Well, let's do a little bit more thinking here. First of all, we got this thing. It's called all income. And all income everywhere on the whole planet, in the universe, it's all income, okay? Now, there's two kinds of income that you can break this up into. There's the documented income and the undocumented income. Now, we know that in all income, there's this thing called 61 gross income, some of which is undocumented and most of which, and the other part is documented. And we also derive that federal income is also within the meaning of gross income. Furthermore, there is an amount of federal income which you can earn that you don't have to report, and that is called a below threshold income. And if you earn a certain amount and nobody documents it, neither the payer nor the recipient, then guess what it is? It's undocumented federal income. What's undocumented federal income? It's illegal, right? Because that's tax. I mean, really, you're breaking the law there. Now, with respect to the remaining federal income that's cognizable by law, that is, recorded on paper and can be seen by the IRS, that is lawfully taxed and assessed. And these are all the federal information returns right here. It's not an inclusive list, obviously, but these are all the papers that you can take this federal income and using these instruments of federal information returns, report your taxes. What about the 61 gross income? Well, the documented portion of the 61 gross income is non-federal income, as we've defined, as we know. Now, this non-federal income has to go through the federal income route in order to be documented under a federal income return. That process is erroneous because it was never federal income. It didn't fall under that category to begin with. So whoever that wrote you the 1099 or the W-2, if they are not federal government, they have made an error. They have made an error and a presumption against you. You see what I'm saying? Now, what about the gross income, the 61 gross income that cannot be seen, that's not seen by the IRS because it's undocumented? For instance, like tips that you receive at a restaurant job. Well, that income is neither illegal nor a less than threshold, and it's what I call voluntary income. Because in order for voluntary income to be documented and taxed, guess what you have to do? You have to go through this federal income loop, right? And then you have to put the paper or put the income on federal paper using federal terms of art. Okay? So this is the income diagram. This is the anatomy of gross income. Number one, there's lawfully taxed federal income. Number two, there is gross income that is not federal and should not be taxed, but is erroneously reported. And then there is the all income and the voluntary income, which is volunteered into the federal system. Now, in order to volunteer into the federal system, again, you have to use federal terms of art. And then finally, we have the illegal and less than threshold federal income. And for the purposes of this discussion, we're not going to touch much on those. Okay. So now we go back to the 61 gross income, which is the income seen in the IRS code. And it reads, all income from whatever source derived, including but not limited to, compensation for services, business, property, interest, rents, royalties, dividends, alimony, annuities, life insurance, blah, 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 blah. Now, think about where we began this presentation and think about the zoo, the restaurant, and the library, and whatever else we visited. What were we trying to do when we looked at a sign? We had to infer something. In other words, there is something here which you do not see, and I'm going to put it to you right here. It's not all income. It's all actual and presumed federal income from whatever source derived. And moreover, it includes voluntary income minus the threshold income or less than threshold income. So this is the actual gross income definition that is that I just derived. And this is what I believe is the true definition of Section 61 gross income. That is, Section 61 gross income equals all presumed income plus all federal income plus all voluntary income. And remember what presumed income, Section 61 income is. It's non-federal, it's non-voluntary income made liable for federal income assessment through an erroneous report, and if the party made liable fails to report to properly object, then he becomes the subject of voluntary compliance. See that? So presumed Section 61 gross income is the one that the American people are falsely and presumptively made liable for. This is the constructive fraud. This is the fraud that you need to rebut on your tax return. Presumed Section 61 gross income is constructive fraud because you have to be a part of the construction. And once you, the people, recognize, understand, and withdraw consent from this constructive fraud, you'll be free of its grasp. Voluntary income is income which is non-federal income volunteered as federal income for taxation. Because such income cannot be seen by the IRS, it requires the use of federal documentation to confine the subject matter into federal terms. It is lawful if it is volunteered knowingly and intentionally. It is unlawful if done without full disclosure, under duress or coercion, or through misinformation. What about illegal income? Do those things exist? What is illegal income again? Well, it's the unreported federal income, which, although subject to federal income tax, is neither reported by the payer nor by the recipient. That is the very definition of illegal or tax dodging, tax evasion. So this is illegal income, and I can give you an example of that. How about the a Guardian report from 2007, where the United States dumped $12 billion in crates of $100 bills into Iraq or into Baghdad? And let me ask you, did the government cut out a 1099 for those funds? How about the insurgent fighters that received that money? Did they pay their share of the income tax? Did they file a 1040? I don't think so. What do you think that means, guys? It's fraud. It's illegal. It should be stopped. So let's go back to our equation. Section 61 gross income, as we have defined and derived, equals presumed income plus federal income plus voluntary income. And in a world with perfect understanding of the law and in the absence of fraud, presumed income would approach zero, freeing the majority of the American population from the IRS. Additionally, the federal income available for lawful taxation would increase by the same amount illegal income decreases. Do you see that? It's pretty simple. Part 5 summary. Number 1, federal income tax is a subset of 61 gross income, and 61 gross income is a subset of all income. Section 61 gross income is presumed plus actual federal income plus voluntarily reported income. Section 61 presumed gross income is the erroneously reported non-federal income that establishes a federal liability on non-federal income. Failure to object the erroneous presumption means agreement, and agreement makes one subject to voluntary compliance. To see practical examples of how these concepts are applied on IRS forms, please watch Part 1, especially Honest Rella and Honest Gabe. They will show you, Honest Abe will show you a proper legal rebuttal of the presumed Section 61 gross income. The last of this 6-part video series represents the IRC terms of art that is used to entrap the American people. So thank you very much for watching. Please share, like, and comment. Remember, you have a duty to be honest, to obey the law, and to keep your brother from harm and injustice. Share this with another American.